Hey all, FilthyRobot here, doing an early access deep dive on the Highwayman. As per always, we're going to be starting with the stats and skills, then moving on to the specialties of the character and trying to conclude with a summary. 39 HP is on the low end, but starting to get a bit more respectable than the very, very squishy characters, which is good because this character takes a lot of damage. It's often in position 2 and position 3. 6 speed is on the fast end again, which is nice for a character with riposte, which is a super powerful buff to get up early in the combat rounds, but not the fastest of the characters out there. So kind of high-end speed, little bit on the low end of HP, but starting to get up there a bit more. Resist profile is pretty standard. Nice disease resist, which is good. They get swung on a lot. Unusually high stun resist. Not super relevant yet, but something to pay attention to. Good bleed resist, medium blight, medium burn, higher move for some reason, and standard debuff resists. So resist profile, a little bit more exciting than, for example, the Grave Robber, but not much more exciting. There's a lot more bleeds in the game right now than there are blights, so that's kind of a nice little perk there. Let's start looking at the skills. Wicked Slice is the auto attack, the default attack of the character. Decent damage on this, 4 to 8, upgrading to 6 to 9. It does upgrade that low end, which is much more important than the high end, in my opinion. It gives you consistency in killing things and predictable damage. But it's not a super exceptionally great skill. 15% starting crit rate's fine. Moving up to 20 as an upgrade is okay. Good targeting, so you can use this from 3, 2, or 1, which is nice, although it can only hit position 1, position 2 for enemies. And the Ignore Death's Door resist is a really medium effect. So the problem with it is the way it behaves. So the only time you get benefit from this ability is if a creature is already at 0 HP. So if a creature has 5% Death's Door resist, for example, and they are at 1 HP and you attack them, even if you did 1 damage and you have Ignore Death's Door resist, it doesn't kill them. It still puts them at 0 HP and you have to roll again. So the Ignore Death's Door resist only comes into play when a creature's already at 0 HP, which makes that a really situational skill. It's okay for finishing off a boss or a very high threat creature that's at 0 HP, but it's not going to let you ignore the Death's Door mechanic at all, which would kind of be the cool way for this skill to be implemented. It'd be really interesting for a stat to be able to ignore some degree of Death's Door on a creature. If it's under 20, then it just acts like it doesn't have it from this skill. Would be a really cool way to implement that in my mind. Pistol Shot is probably the weakest Highwayman skill, or one of the weakest Highwayman skills. The upside of this is it's flexible. Position 2, 3, or 4 hits positions 2, 3, or 4 on the other side. Medium crit at crit 10 going to crit 15. Low damage at 3 to 6 upgrading to 4 to 8. Give you riposte off of combo is a weird thing. Riposte is a super strong skill, and there are ways to itemize for damage that don't care if you're ranged or melee, so you could potentially have a mixed build, but I think there's just better skills than Pistol Shot to be running the bulk of the time, and there's better combo payoffs to be burning combo status debuffs on opponents. I think this is one of the weaker skills of the character, and I tend to try to unequip it as soon as I can, but it's playable and it's flexible, and if you're not wanting to spend Shrine unlocks on skilling up the Highwaymen early because they start so strong already, then it does make some sense to run this. All right, moving on, Duelist Advance. This is the bread and butter of this character. This skill is awesome. Starts off moving you forward 1, low damage from 3 to 5, but not insanely low damage. It's still a decent amount of damage from it. It's really flexible where it can hit and what positions you can use it from, hitting anything except the back rank and being usable anywhere except the front rank. And it gives you the bread and butter of the Highwayman, which is it puts riposte stacks on you, which means you counterattack. There's a lot of AoEs in this game. There's a lot of opponents that focus position 1, 2, 3 and position 1 and 2 in particular. This tends to get very, very high value from my experience with riposte, that is. And the fact that this, as an upgrade, gives you a stack of dodge, only 50% dodge, but still dodge, and gives you a 3rd stack of riposte, as well as doing more damage and more crit, is just awesome. This skill is super good. It's often a auto include for me in terms of prioritizing a mastery point. It just gives them survivability, gives them damage. It's just really good all around. Bread and butter of the Highwayman, in my opinion. Moving on, Tracking Shot. This one is fairly situational. Ignoring dodge is a powerful effect, but just removing dodge for the cost of ignoring dodge is kind of useless, right? You can do that with a regular attack, and then the regular attack, let's say you're just trying to remove a dodge pip. If you regular attack them, you have a 50% chance of hitting them and removing the dodge, and a 50% chance of just removing the dodge. and so your chances of doing something are increased by using a regular attack as opposed to using tracking shot. Now, tracking shot can be used from anywhere. It can hit almost anything, and the upgraded version does ignore stealth, remove stealth, and apply combo. So the upgraded version is a little bit better, but it's still only situationally good. Most of the time, you'd rather do other things to have these effects. So I think this is probably one of these skills that you're just not going to use very much as it stands. Maybe versus some really annoying stealth enemies, this will be worth equipping. And I do think Darkest Dungeon 2 is going to do that to you. I think you're going to unlock almost full skills and full masteries on most characters and be switching skills around for the fights that you encounter. But really unimpressed with this skill as it stands right now. Moving on, Take Aim. This is much, much better, especially the upgraded version. So the basic version, still not really worth using. You spend your entire turn to gain crit. It's pretty much a guaranteed crit, I believe, right? It's a 100% crit chance, I think, off this, or 50% crit chance. I think it's 100, though. So I think it's basically a guaranteed crit here. And then you gain a dodge stack and remove blind from yourself. That's a pretty nice series of events because, again, removing a single stack of blind, it's almost always worth just attacking with, in the same way that attacking against a single stack of dodge is pretty much always worth attacking, because the upside is you remove it at no cost, and the downside is you spend an action doing it. And the tier 2 version of this is way better. So you get 2 rounds of crit, 2 stacks of dodge on yourself, a speed buff, which is kind of minor, but still something, and then you remove blind from the target. So I quite like Take Aim. I like it in the current Act 1 boss fight too, where there's some rounds where you can't use a melee attack, so this is something to do while your melee skills are locked out. This is decent. I see this having good action economy and a number of the fights that currently exist in the game, which is kind of nice. All right, moving on. Point Blank Shot. This one's kind of fun. So Highwayman's a fairly flexible character in its positioning. It can play nicely in starting in 4 and then living mostly 2 or 3. And then if it does end up in position 1, either from a bad shuffle from an enemy or other movement effects, you get to utilize Point Blank. Point Blank is very high damage. It upgrades nicely into continued high damage. It has okay crit chance. It's got a nice effect, which is it applies a combo stack to an opponent while doing good damage. That's just a nice ability all around. It's of course limited in its application. You have to be in position 1. I don't think it's so strong that I'm going out of my way to put Highwayman, make Highwayman regularly occur in position 1, and killing only position 1 isn't the greatest of abilities in general, and you do lose some flexibility as to what you can target by being in position 1 on this character. But I still think this ability is, I use it in some comps, and I think it's pretty strong in the comps we do use. So I like it, and I like seeing Point Blank back in the game. It's a fun ability to play around. All right, moving on. Grapeshot Blast. Don't like this ability, pretty much. It's low damage. It only hits position 1, 2. It gives you extra stacks of riposte if the target's comboed, but I think there's better payoffs for combo. I was expecting this to be a little bit better, and then when I used it, I found it just totally mediocre. I almost always find I'd rather be either refreshing my dodge and refreshing my riposte stacks by Duelist Advancing, or I'd rather use one of the high payoff abilities like Point Blank or something like that. So I think this is pretty much a dud, but there's probably some fights where position 1, 2 are particularly annoying. I'm thinking about the goats that do so much damage, so getting damage down on both the goats might be worthwhile, stuff like that. You might pull this in for some fights, but most of the time I think you'd rather just not have it. All right, moving on. Open Vein. I find this pretty versatile. Again, same restrictions as basically Wicked Slice. You can be in position 1, 2, 3, which means it's really generous in terms of where you can use it from, which is great. Bleed dots are good in this game. You rarely itemize the Highwayman to apply dots, so this is only going to be situationally good. Probably in some maps you just don't want it equipped because you're not going to have a high enough bleed chance to justify it, but it's a little bit higher damage than something like Wicked Slice if you're getting a couple ticks of that dot. So really the decision to make here is what's the zone like, and then maybe you equip Open Vein instead of Wicked Slice, depending on the zone and the enemy structure that you're fighting. But I think it's decent. I think it's a fine ability. All right, Double Tap. This ability is sick. It does so much damage. 4 to 8 starting is really good. It is quite restrictive in where you can cast it from and cast it on. So you can only be position 2, 3, targeting position 2, 3. And initially plus 30% damage when target is below 30% HP almost doesn't matter. Most of the time when a target's below 30% HP, unless it's like a boss, you're already doing high damage. But this is something that's very good versus the high HP annoying enemies like bosses and ghouls and stuff like that. And the upgrade is disgustingly good. because 6 to 9 A is very good damage. It upgraded the low end of the damage range, which I prefer if I have to choose between distributing between low end and high end. It's more consistent. The crit chance doesn't change, and it's a low crit, which isn't amazing, but that damage boost is much better when it can be applied to anything below 50% HP. I don't really value the ignore death's door resistance, but it's okay. Especially when this ability is so much better versus creatures with high HP. So you might want, for example, ignore Death's Door versus boss to make sure that boss dies before it gets one more massive attack off on you. But by and large, I think the upgraded version of Double Tap is just absolutely disgustingly powerful. It's pretty late in the Highwayman tree, so it's going to be a slow unlock. And I think the Highwayman is good enough that you don't need to invest in unlocking their skills very often. So this is probably one of the last things you're going to get, but it's a nice payoff when you do finally get around to unlocking it. All right, Highway Robbery. This ability is cute, I feel, more than particularly good. I don't think starting that you want to use it. I think unupgraded, it's pretty much unusable. Spending an entire action to remove a positive token from the opponent isn't that good. Most of the time, positive tokens are removed by just attacking. So if you think what they are, the positive tokens are things like dodge and block, both of which are already removed by attacking, or things like damage buffs. So yes, it's a little bit more flexible, but the bulk of the ones you're going to be encountering are better removed with the damaging ability, because then you have the upside of doing damage, some damage, dot application, or whatever else, while still removing the token. Now, it gets a little bit more exciting on the upgraded version where you steal stuff. It still feels a little cute to me, but there's definitely going to be fights where if you preemptively know you're going into a fight, like for example, if you're walking into a cultist battle, like a cultist battle at a node where you know it's coming, being able to steal 2 positive tokens is just awesome. Because then you can steal like crit and dodge from an opponent, and then for a single action, you're guaranteeing 50% more damage on your side, as well as a defensive status, and removing that from the opponent. So I think this can be situationally great, although I think it probably needs to be upgraded before it's even remotely usable. I haven't played a lot with it. It's just the way I'm looking at it feels that way to me. All right, finally, there's Double Cross. A little less excited about this one. The Highwayman this applies block 1 and gives a Vone to the opponent. You have to be in position 1-2, which is awkward for the Highwayman. The Highwayman really likes to be in 2-3, so a lot of times this is not going to be available to you because you're sitting in position 3. The effect is not very good. The damage is very low, and although you're getting low damage, applying a status effect, removing a status effect because you applied damage, and generating block, that's nice efficiency there. It's just the stuff it does is kind of medium. Block 1 is only 50% damage reduction. It's nowhere near as good as block 2. And double Vone is good. So maybe the upgraded version of this plays a little bit better than the non-upgraded version. Single Vone is kind of whatever, and that damage range is real low. So I don't like this that much, but I could see it being useful, especially if you're trying to build a comp that plays in position 1-2 using point blank a lot. Maybe there's some utility here, like you don't always want a point blank. You set up for a Vone, then a point blank kind of deal. But my general take on this is there's better skills in the Highwayman, notably things like riposte and double tap, for example. All right, moving on. By and large, I think the Highwayman's great. They're one of the unlocked starting characters. They're very strong to begin with because they start with Duelist Advance, which triggers their most powerful ability, Riposte. They're not super flexible in the sense that they are a damage dealer first and foremost, and they don't combo particularly well. They don't generate combo pips except through point blank, basically. They don't take advantage of combos super well outside of... They basically just don't take advantage of combo very well at all. But I don't think it matters. I think Riposte and Duelist Advance is so strong early, and the flexibility of a damage dealer hitting almost every position regularly is so good with okay stats, decent resistances, and decent HP that I think they're just good enough. And they're another class that I like because you don't have to unlock their stuff early. So if you're looking at meta progression, you can max out some other classes while this class carries you around the battlefield from the get-go, which is kind of nice. And they do play in like a fair number of comps. They're good versus boss fights. Riposte is excellent there. They can play in dancing comps because they have a lot of movement modifying skills. They have the ability to apply bleeds, and they have nice execution abilities with double tap, so they can play versus the big enemies like bosses and ghouls and that type of thing. By and large, I think the character's pretty good. Like I'd give it like A tier, basically, not S tier, but A tier. And then Riposte would be what steals the show for this character. Anyways, hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.